Welcome, I'm Bill Wake. This is my summary of the work we've been doing on Twitch this week. We're working with Fiume, a personal finance tool that lets you do medium and long-term projections. And this is really the wrap-up of the project for now. All right, so what did we do? Well, mostly we focused on date assumptions. So this is the idea that you can tie something to kind of a variable date and then have a slider that changes the date. So maybe you want to consider some options for retirement. So you say, I'm going to retire. You don't say not in 2052. You say, I'm going to retire according to this variable, this assumption retirement date. And then you set that up maybe to range from 2024 to 2054 and see what happens. All right, we also fixed a defect where the people selection was wrong. And basically this is, drop downs are a little bit tricky. So we worked our way through that, I guess. We did a little work on error prevention, kind of a bonus session this morning for me. And finally, we demoed and kind of wrapped up the project. So the challenge or the learning for me around drop downs, I don't think I have the perfect formula or recipe, but it's my best understanding. So what I think you have to do is you need a state variable for each field. At state creates an observable variable. And then you populate the state in the constructor. If the object exists, you're going to use that one so you can edit. Otherwise, you need another one to, an empty-ish one to make a new one. And then inside the code, we'll use onChange value with initial true. So that's where we would do things to, if we detect a change of one of our state variables, we'll update the resulting object, and the initial true makes sure it gets created even the first time. And then finally, on appear lets you grab values in, well, I'll say global, but it's kind of quote global state. So maybe you need a default value because you need access to global state. You couldn't get it until the view appears. So sometimes you'll need that. All right, so let's take a demo and look at the code. All right, so this is around assumptions, and we had annual percentage rate assumptions, and we've added these date assumptions. So they just, they'll tend to be, 2020 to 2100 is kind of a reasonable range. 877, I don't think there's a lot of, long-term financial planning for 10,000 years kind of thing. So that's more of an example. But we set them up so you could create these variables, and then in your money source, you can specify them with an assumed date. So let's say income starts or ends rather. Let's make it. Oh, I guess I should leave that one. That's fine, but this one's the one. So we're saying it ends at last day of work. Okay, so last day of work is 2020. Currently 2047, so that's a long time to work. What if I work closer to 2035, or can I get down to 2024? 2025 is close enough. Okay, if I work till 2025, the maximum I'll earn according to the projections is 500,000. If I work to 2040, it goes up to 700,000, something like that. So it just lets you make trade-offs like that. And rather than go through and tediously kind of edit this and say, okay, now let's try 2027, okay, 2028, 2029. You can get this kind of adjustable thing, and that feels pretty good to me to do that. We tried to get instant adjustments across everything, and it just couldn't quite pull it off. I'd be curious what that takes. I'm sure it can be done. So, all right. So that's the data assumptions. Let me look at the people issue. So we let you create people, and you can specify something according to their age. Okay. So here we have a couple. So Liza at 70. She's going to take Social Security at 70. Okay. And so you have to select this, and we had some weird problem where it couldn't select. And actually, it showed up oddly when you first opened it. It would just go like that. It would just pop up and go away real quick. And then you'd click again and it would open it. And it turned out we had some stuff that's tied to individual views of individual items or something. And if you don't make a separate view with a separate open state for each window like that, it messes up. So that's one thing. I guess that was over here. If I edited Liza, it would pop up real quickly and boop, and then disappear. Okay. All right. So anyway, you can choose those. We had some issue where it was grabbing the wrong thing because we had the wrong states sitting around, and we fixed that. And then in today's session, we did something to make it so you can't reuse a name. So I've got capital I inflation. If I try and create a new one that's called inflation, okay, the name is already in use and I can't create it. And that's similarly true for dates, and it's similarly true for people. So a little bit of error prevention. There's still some stuff that's not quite there. If you go and delete somebody and then recreate or things like that, you can end up with we detected that it's an unknown person and we kind of zero it out. But it would be better if there was more guidance to you that was going on. You could easily forget to look through these and make sure, So we talked about maybe if delete would check for those first and then give the option to not delete them, or some more reasonable default on behavior on that. So there's certainly future work to do. All right, but this is as far as we're going to go. And just kind of summary. So when you do these, you can create liabilities, expenses, income, or assets. And so when you do, an income stream runs for a certain start date. And I think you can see the bend in the curve there is 2027, so that's the income from that stream stops at that point, and you can see it sinks down a little bit in general. You can create alternatives like this one that says, what if I buy a boat? Okay. Now boats are pretty expensive, maybe not quite that expensive to own, but they have monthly expense. If you're in the water, you got to pay a dock fee probably. If you're not in the water, you got to pay a storage fee, and you have to keep it up to date and whatever. So for us, we added last week we added these things to turn things on and off. So I notice in here, like the expensive ones seem to be the boat, and no surprise, but what happens if I take it out? Well, my worst case option is now $300,000. Before it was negative 400 or so. And most of the option, half the options were negative. So taking out that boat really improves the picture. And so you would probably, in realistic terms, if you said, how am I doing with this boat? You'd say, wow, this boat's costing me, multiple $100,000 in my lifetime. And you might say, well, I'm just not going to do that whole set of scenarios and turn them off. And then you'll lose those income streams, or this income stream. You'll still have 4 scenarios because we had some Social Security scenarios, but it gives you some notion of making decisions and cutting things out from that. So I think that part's good. I think in general, being able to add these streams in, I think if you had too many scenarios, it would get unbearable. And my experience with it so far is kind of 8 to 10 is really stretching it, and I don't think any more than that would do it. But also, I think in the most common case, you're going to look at when should I retire and when should I take Social Security, at least if you're an American citizen. And maybe it's when should I take it and when should my spouse take it. And, if you just have a few options for each of those. You can kind of test the parameters a bit and then decide, let's just take this one off the table and go from there. So I think it's a benefit to look at all those scenarios pretty quickly, but I think you can get overwhelmed. So there's kind of this little sweet spot that we can bear it with, 10 or 12 and not more than that. Okay, well, let's look at some code. So we worked first in date specifier. We have this way, I guess we started it the week before, but we started allowing you to specify some sort of assumption, and we keep track of, what happens in the case you're using an assumed date and so on. So there's an assumed date view that basically when you're creating or editing it, it's looking, and if there's an assumed date name, it takes advantage of that. If there's no date name, you're probably creating it and we'll default it. But it basically boils down to, if you don't have anything in there, you've got content unavailable, you can't really use this option. Otherwise, there's a picker that gives you the list of choices, and you pick one of those names and do it. And then in my description of how we do pickers on change, we call update values, and that creates the date spec that is bound. So the bound, that's basically the output of this. So depending what your selection changes to, we'll update that value and your caller will see it. Okay, in adding assumptions, originally I thought I was going to make date assumptions and percent assumptions the same. Then stuff got goofy enough that I thought, let's just treat them separately, and if they're similar, we'll do something about it. And then when we started doing the dates, it was very obvious immediately that they're just way too similar. And so the only difference as far as the value is really, are you keeping track of a percent, in which case you're probably going to draw a percent sign on it, or is it a date and then it's a year? We basically pulled those in, defined a couple defaults for each one if you need an empty one, and then this type was added in that just distinguishes percent and date. They all have min, max, and current. It's all ints. We don't do doubles for percents. If you did, you might have to do more work to keep things separate and straight. But what the advantage of having these together is we can put them in the same list. And so now the assumptions list, basically it has two sections, one for percents, one for dates, and you're adding stuff to one or the other based on the type of the thing you add. Otherwise, it's just a very simple list wrapper. All right, and there's a view with it. So assumptions, we want to show each section, and each section we put a header. So one was for percents and one's for dates. And then within that, we go through the assumptions in the particular section and show an assumption view for each one. Okay. Assumption view, well, the heart of it, it's just really showing everything on a line. What's the name of this thing? What's the current value? Min, max, and there's a slider. Very, very straightforward. Okay. I don't know. I don't think, am I rushing through? All right. The thing we had to work on, though, and why this thing around these screens that were not showing up properly, they would open and close right away the first time. Basically, because I moved assumptions from having one section for percents to two sections, I couldn't just say open the assumption. Was it edit view? Can't remember the name. Assumption header view. Yeah. So each header wanted to open up a separate list, that showed only that header stuff. And we had a value that told whether we showed the view or not. And that got confusing for the header because it had two sections, but they were sharing the same variable to show which one was open. Which one had the dialog open. And so instead we pulled this out to its own function. Now each instance has its own flag to tell you whether or not that is visible. The editing view is visible or not. I've done this at least twice, this project. I'll probably have to do it one or two more times before I remember what's going on, but hopefully that gives me the incentive. I mean, this view is big enough, it should have been pulled out anyway. And now I kind of systematically know, like, oh, it's got its own, it represents its own entity. It better be on separate state if you're going to show things off it. Okay, and then finally that edit assumptions view. Well, it comes in with the name, min, max, and current. That's about all it knows. And we put in that check to make sure the name was valid. But really, you're just filling out these number fields with the values. And that's all it takes to create one. I don't even know that I don't think we had to do anything different because it was a date. So we just reused edit assumptions view. That's where we are. That's where we're stopping for now. Next week, we start a different project, but it's a familiar one. We worked on Kilt Calc, a calculator to help kilt makers do things like set the number of pleats in the back of the kilt and so on. My wife is a kilt maker, and this was an ongoing problem for her because you're taking something like, I have 37 inches of material and I want 11 pleats, and how many is that? And having to do the arithmetic in eighths of inches and sixteenths of inches and so on was driving her a bit nuts. So this is a project we did for that. A few other people have seen it and really like it. So I'm going to fix some known issues and push towards a beta test, see anything we can find that is confusing and should be cleaned out before that. And my hope is maybe by the end of this coming week or sometime by the end of the month anyway, that I can get a bigger group, and if they're happy, publish this on the App Store and make a few dollars off it. There aren't that many kilt makers in the world, so this is definitely not my retirement fund. All right, but anyway, we'll do that starting Monday. We meet Monday to Thursday, 2 to 4:30 Eastern Time, or 6 to 8:30 p.m. UTC. If you come to xp123.com, xp123.com/Twitch during those times, you can join us live. If you come to xp123.com/YouTube anytime, you can see all the old sessions, time delayed and lightly edited. We're about, I think I was putting out I think the current episodes are coming out around September 20th or 23rd was the last one. So it's a couple of weeks behind, basically. I put out the summaries every week, so if you want to kind of keep up for the week's work, you won't be out of sync. But if you're watching all the old videos, you're very dedicated and you'll be a little bit behind. All right, well, take care. I hope you can join us sometime, and catch you later.